You hear me okay?
Yeah.
Cool. How you been, man? It's been a while.
Good.
Yeah, it's good to see you.
You too.
Cool. Thanks for chiming in. Um, this is so I do this podcast where I review these albums and then also talk to artists like yourself. So I'm happy to have you as part of the program.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I was wondering first, I do want to talk about Wayne Shorter, but if possible, maybe we can just kind of discuss a little bit about your career and how it all started. Can you tell me about your upbringing in Washington, D.C.?
Well, for me, I was born in DC and was raised in the city and right outside the city in what's called Silver Spring, Maryland. And I feel I'm a true Washingtonian in that I got the greatest experience by both my parents being Virginians, and then dealing with the inner city and dealing with the very nearby suburbs.
Mhm.
And I was afforded a lot of opportunities on both sides of the line. And my parents were rather supportive of me, playing music or doing whatever I was trying to do. And so it was a pretty fertile environment in that I had musical stuff on both sides of the family, mainly my father's side, but there were more musicians on my father's side. But I think I got the musical side from maybe both of them,
Right.
both my mother and father's side of the family. But I'm the only full-time musician out of everybody. I mean, there were church musicians and people who like to dance and people into, pop music a little bit. But I'm the only person who pursued music, college and professional life.
Mm.
Um, both my parents very blue collar people, but very culturally aware,
Right.
and turned me on to different things and allowed me to experiment with this and that. My older brother Mike is like another father in a way because we're 15 years apart,
Oh,
and so he was the one that was Washington D.C.'s disco dance champion for a couple years.
oh, really? All right.
Yeah, and he had a crazy record collection. So I heard everything, and in the 70s we had Casey Kasem's Top 40.
Sure.
So I would hear everything. Like I was just telling somebody the other day, you might hear I don't know, Ohio players, Aretha Franklin, Sergio Mendez, Gap Band, Ramsey Lewis, and then Herb Alpert, Tijuana Brass.
Right.
So it's like I just heard everything. But my brother, he loved funk and R&B stuff. So I heard all of the Parliament, Funkadelic, Ohio players, Gap Band, Cameo, all the doo-wop groups,
Sure.
and the stuff that we would consider jazz, but today we might call it smooth jazz. But it was still jazz. Some Jimmy McGriff and Ramsey Lewis. Then my mom would play the staple singers and Marvin Gaye and Jerry Butler and oh man, Teddy Pendergrass and Mahalia Jackson. And my father actually liked Ray Charles, and I once had a debate with him about country music. And I said, man, why you keep watching these old westerns and stuff, man, and this Willie Nelson and all this stuff you're listening to?
Yeah.
Until he explained to me, and he knew I was playing Georgia in school, and my reference was Ray Charles. He goes, well, Ray Charles sings country music. I'm like, no, he doesn't.
Check
He's
out
like,
the album, man.
he was like, yes, he does.
Yeah.
So then we ventured down that path. So,
Great.
um, so it was fun.
Yeah. So when did you start playing, and when did you pick up a horn, or was the sax your first instrument? Even?
Sax was my first real instrument. 12 years old, I guess. Whatever that summer before seventh grade. I wanted to play before that, but they wanted me to play clarinet, and I didn't want to play clarinet. And lo and behold, I ended up having to play clarinet later in life.
Mhm.
Um, my father, my older brother, just like one older than me, 10 years older than me, Anthony, is a tenor player.
Okay.
So he ended up kind of quitting at one point, and my father was really pissed because he bought him this horn. And when he was going to purchase my saxophone, he said, "Are you wanting me to buy this or rent this?" I said, "Well, yeah, go ahead, buy it." And then he threatened to kill me in front of the whole music store if I quit.
Yeah.
So here I'm like shaking.
I know
But
it
I
well.
mean, but I got a horn and I kept playing.
Cool.
You know,
So was it who were you like? Who were your first teachers? Was it jazz that inspired you right away to play? Like, did you play jazz right away?
just from hearing music in the house and everything, it was more like formal beginning band, moving your way up through. It's like the Bellwin band methods,
Mhm.
Bellwin band builder, all of that stuff, some Brubank, and then it was I had really good music teachers, really, really good music teachers that put the right music in front of me. So I feel like when I graduated high school, I could read better than I read now
Hmm.
because we just read so much and hard stuff
Right.
that I interpret way better now. I still do well, but like I think I could read way better then. Because this was some of the music was so hard in high school because we had a really serious band program.
Yeah.
My early saxophone teachers, the one on one, but I didn't have that many. I really didn't get real deep private lessons until college. I had a few in high school, so I was kind of self taught and doing stuff based on what I learned in school.
Okay.
And
Was there a saxophone player you particularly gravitated towards? Was there someone you?
yeah, I really loved Grover Washington Jr. So I just was transcribing Grover. I had a transcription book that only had maybe 8 or 10 tunes in there, but they were like the whole recording transcriptions.
Mhm.
So when he played soprano, when I didn't have a soprano, I just played it on alto. When he played baritone, I would just try to play it on tenor. So I had an alto and a tenor,
Right.
and that helped me learn how to transcribe because there were parts that weren't there, so I had to just keep playing. But since I got familiar with notation and what it sounded like,
Mhm.
things came around a little easier that way. And that went off into my father's good friend, Mr. James Hanna, gave my dad some recordings to give me. Some Train, some Ben Webster, some Coleman Hawkins, some other Grover that I didn't have. And that opened me up some more. I think they thought I was going to be a tenor player, but I think I'm really deep down a tenor player that plays the alto.
Hmm.
I
Interesting.
really, I really don't want to play the tenor for anybody.
Huh.
It's just too big.
Yeah. I never put it together, but when I hear you play, there's almost like a tenor spirit in your
Yeah,
playing in some way, and the tone too has a certain richness. I think. That,
I've always strived to make my alto bigger and my soprano bigger. Like soprano would get all the soprano qualities, but move towards an alto, and alto the same move towards a tenor.
right. Yeah.
I
I can.
never felt like I could get the tenor to sound the way I wanted it to sound.
Hmm. Interesting. Cool. All right. So, from the college was what William Patterson for you? I can't remember.
No, I was back home at the University of the District of Columbia, which is a HBCU.
Okay.
Um, it is what they call the land grant college. It used to be DC Teachers College on the front of where Howard University used to be.
Hmm.
So it's a historically black college, but it was the city university, not a city college. So other teachers from American and maybe Maryland, Howard, other colleges in the DC area were teaching there too. And so we got a great education for a fraction of the cost. Now it's financially probably pretty competitive with other schools that way, but still cheaper. And it's right in the heart of DC.
Right.
And I studied with a great trombonist named Calvin Jones,
Hmm.
who was on the road with Ray Charles, who wrote a lot of music. He was a trombonist, bassist, could play valve instruments like flugelhorn and trumpet if he wanted to. Um, and he was a great composer and piano player, teacher, coach, great musician. A huge, huge influence on my life. It's like arguably my musical father for the most part. I mean, there's a few others that really helped raise me, but he was the first one who really saw what he needed to see and helped me get to what I needed to get to.
Great. Cool. So how do you go from DC? What brings you to like the New York, New Jersey area?
My father passed away just before I graduated high school. So there was just a little too much in the DC area in DC and like nearby Silver Spring that was too much of a reminder, too much pressure on me
Hmm.
that I decided when I saw a couple friends leave to leave. And I initially was going to the Hart School to study with Jackie McLean.
Right.
But then I thought about my audition, which was great. I was right there gonna go, but I decided not to go because I didn't really want to let him down. I wasn't sure if I was psychologically really ready to be that far from home with all that happened to me, with dealing with my dad. My father passed as a result of suicide. So I was the first family member there on the scene.
Oh, wow.
So that took me out for a while. No one could really tell, but it really took me out for years. And so to go that far away, I didn't think it was fair to myself or my mother because it would be a few more hours that she wasn't familiar with trying to get to me. And I said, let me make a decision here. You know, let me make a decision. I don't think Jackie McLean was that happy about that decision at the time, but I think he grew to understand why I made my decision.
Hmm.
So I went to William Patterson.
Right.
You know,
Okay. And then who did you study with? Was there any particular teachers that was like a mentor to you at Patterson?
initially I studied with Andy Fusco,
Hmm.
who actually passed during the COVID
Right.
pandemic, but I ended up really seeking out other players that really were able to cater to what I was trying to get to. So I asked Rufus Reed about Kenny Garrett, and he told me that he couldn't get Kenny Garrett because I initially thought Bobby Watson was still there, but he wasn't.
Hmm.
So he said, "Well, what about Steve Wilson?" I said, "I like Steve Wilson too." So I went and had a lesson with Steve in New York. I came back and told Rufus what was up.
Hmm.
He hired Steve, so I studied with Steve Wilson, Gary Simoleon, and Joe Lovano. Those were my saxophone teachers while I was at William Patterson.
All good. All great names, right?
All great names. I mean, Steve made the greatest impact on me by being an alto player, but I think Lovano is probably the second most important. They all were important, but the second most important because he established changes, time, and freedom at the same time,
Right.
which to me was really important because I didn't want to necessarily sound like cookie cutter. I didn't want to sound like everybody else.
Right.
I didn't want to be the typical guy who wants to sound just like Cannonball. Because the people I like were more Gary Bartz, Jackie McLean,
Mm.
um, Hank Crawford, Arthur Blythe. I liked those more singing and like vinegary sound. I liked Cannonball. Don't get me wrong, but after Bird, those other ones were more important to me. There's things that I really still find important about Cannonball as far as what he did that's in my playing. But I didn't find that his style was exactly what I wanted to pattern myself after.
Mm.
And the other modernists that were on the scene at the time had kind of a blended perspective towards what I was thinking about with these other players. And then I was also influenced by people like Arthur Blythe and Oliver Lake.
Hmm.
So I needed some other things in my playing. In terms of those alto players, I needed some other things in my playing. I always listened to Train, Wayne, and Dexter Gordon. Those were like the tenor players that really like made it for me.
Right.
You know, I'm sorry if you hear noise. That's the washing machine making
Oh no, I don't actually.
noise. All right.
And I'm at my music studio, so you'll probably hear some pretty soon. It starts cranking.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. That's why I was laughing when you said with your father, who said, you better play this thing, or I'm going to kill you. Because we rent the instruments here and sell instruments. Uh, So we do, I don't know, something like 250, 300 rentals a year. I hear the same conversation. You really going to play this thing? Are you really going to play this thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, Dad. And then lo and behold, 6 months later, here's-
I mean, he threatened to kill me in front of a room of people. So we're talking like, I don't know how many years ago. I mean, but it's like they all, I guess, understood his sentiment. you know.
it's so funny too, because like every musician I talk to, and I ask kind of the same question, like why did you gravitate to this instrument and to that? Particularly saxophone players, they always have a different. So like Billy Harper's like the thing just had so many buttons. I just had to figure it out. Like it's just how does this thing work? Because it is like a crazy looking instrument. If you're trying to decide an instrument just based on looks, right?
Well, it was like I signed up for beginning band, and I was like going sax, clarinet, trumpet, or sax, trumpet, drum, sax, trumpet, drum, and it came back around the room and hit sax. So I said saxophone.
hmm I mean, sax is cool.
Well, yeah, I mean, I happen to be, I think, more suited for the saxophone.
Right. I mean,
You know,
that was my first. That was my first instrument was a sax.
right,
Obviously, it didn't take, but it was like it was the only. If I have to play in band, because I wanted to play guitar, I played guitar as a kid.
right.
The next coolest instrument, like rock guys, there's being from Jersey Shore.
Come on, Clarence Clemens, man. Come
Clarence
on,
plays the sax. I could do that,
come on, man.
but no, I couldn't.
Right.
Cool. So then you're in New York or New Jersey. You're in the New York area, and then you start. You're through school and you start working. Of course. Tell me about because you've played with some pretty big heavyweights. Tell me about some of the names you worked with and how you got to connect with them.
Well, I always tell my students that a lot of work I got is because I asked. It wasn't just a selection process.
hmm
Obviously, there is a selection process, but I said, man, I would love to do. I want to play with you, man. I'm inspired by what you do. So, I mean, I put myself in position because I wanted to be around certain people. Um, I worked 15 years playing lead alto with Frank Foster with his loud minority. I guess it was a year and a half playing with the Basie band, and in New York there were two different divisions of the Ellington Orchestra. Like a year or so playing with the Ellington Orchestra. I played several gigs with Lionel Hampton himself.
Oh wow. Okay.
Um, Steve Teray was one of my teachers at William Patterson years ago, so I played and toured and recorded with him. And now 10 years with Buster Williams. Um, the World Saxophone Quartet, Roy Hargrove. I've had a very long relationship with Roy, and I run his big band that has a residency once a month at the Jazz Gallery, because we used to play at the old Jazz Gallery, but now we're in the 20s in Manhattan. And I was his lead alto player on the record Emergence, on the road with RH Factor. There's videos of me playing with him at the quintet from Newport Jazz Festival. So, I'm the band leader for that organization. I mean, so many different people. Russell Gunn, uh, various singers, Sharonee Wade, Jasmine Horn, Vanessa Rubin. I played with the legendary Little Jimmy Scott for 5 years. Um, I've had maybe a charmed career to a degree by having so many legendary people call me to do things. I met Jimmy Scott at a jam session
Mm.
at someone's house, and I didn't realize that my wife was sitting right next to him. And I'm playing. I go back and sit right down. I wasn't paying attention. I was all music, 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 music. I wasn't thinking about anything. And he said, "Young man, you sound good, man." And I look and say, "Hey, man, I know who you are." Now that I realize. And then he asked me if I would join him for a gig at Tavern on the Green, and that was a 2-week run at Tavern on the Green.
hmm
And it just kept being 2-week runs, 2-week runs, and then go out here and go out there, playing with the great Little Jimmy Scott. So some of it was being in the right place at the right time, um, being open, being humble enough to just accept what they have to say and the guidance. Um, and just sometimes I just ask. I said, man, I would love to play with you. And sometimes people think you have to be so shy, or that's an arrogant thing to say. I
Right.
don't really think it is, because I think it's a matter of trying to, push your destiny. Like, if you really feel like you're there, if you're gonna make it, you're gonna make. If you make it more than a year, then you were supposed to be there.
Hmm. Great.
You know.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it seems, especially in the jazz world, it's like these people are really accessible in a way. We maybe put them on a pedestal, but I mean, even I get an opportunity, like yesterday, I talked to George Benson
Yeah,
or Ron Carter, or whatever. They're just they're gigging musicians,
they're
and
human beings.
yeah,
We're just human beings. At the end of the day.
yeah. I think it takes a little bit of balls when you're young, though, to realize that. I think, and awareness, and as we get a little older, you know, I think we realize we're all kind of we're in the same boat. Maybe some boats are a little bit bigger, right? But you know,
Well, like at William Patterson, my ensemble was put together to play Stanley Cowell's music,
right.
and so Stanley showed up. We ended up having to play with him too, and I had met him back in D.C. So when he came to Jersey to do this thing, afterwards, I said, if you ever saw a place for me, I would love to do it, because on the particular recording had Steve Coleman on it.
Hmm.
I was like, man, I like to keep learning through this process. I like what you're doing with the writing and everything. I like to learn more. I told Stanley. A year or so later, he called me. So I played with Stanley about 5 years hardcore, recorded with him, and then off and on. And then the last, oh, I don't know, he's been gone now a year or two, 2 years. I don't know. I played with Stanley like much like Roy most of my adult musical life,
Hmm.
off and on. I'm on three of Stanley's records. I mean, he's definitely like a father figure. So, like I said, I have these people that were pivotal in my development
Hmm.
as a musician and as a man. Stanley Cowell's one, Calvin Jones is another, Frank Foster's another. They made a huge, huge impact on me musically and on my life. Um, Oliver Lake has made a huge influence on me. I played so many years with the drummer, producer Cecil Brooks III.
Hmm.
I mean, I can't even count, man, 20 years, playing with him.
Right.
So those kind of relationships are very long lasting, and they mean a lot. But you find out there's a human thing, there's a human condition, there's a human response to everything. It's not just this stars in the sky all the time.
Right. Right. And I think also, I mean, if, back when we were living in the same area, you were around. I mean, I would see you at Cecil's, and you would come to
Mhm.
Bob Backlund's Monday night jam session. And we'd
Yeah,
play trumpets. I mean, just being available, is a big part of it. I think. Would you agree?
I would say so. I do think though sometimes with young folks, as levels of respect have gone down for elders,
Yeah.
familiarity can breed contempt, where people get too familiar too soon. And I used to wonder, why didn't I see, God rest his soul, Wallace Roney hanging out much, and
Mhm.
why Kenny Garrett didn't show up that much.
Right.
People got too familiar and would act like you were a local or whatever. I live locally.
Hmm.
I don't consider myself a local.
Right. Right.
I live here because I like living here. My family's here, but I live here because mainly for one reason. I came here because of music, not because I wanted to pay the amount of money I pay in taxes.
Yeah.
you know, Thankfully we're doing okay, but um, you know, in terms of the music, sometimes people when they see you a lot, they take you for granted.
Yeah. There's a truth to that. I agree. And I think also, I mean, being an educator, um, I've noted, and I know that you are as well. I don't know if you've noticed it, but I'd say over the last 5, 6, 7 years, perhaps, there has been a different mindset overall. I mean, there's still some students who stand out, but it's almost as if you're working for them, or there's this concept that they're your equals, or they try to be at times. And I think it's a little
I, I,
damaging.
sh- I shut that down immediately.
Yeah,
Immediately. We can be friendly. I can be your friend, but I'm not your friend in that regard.
right.
You know, I can be your advocate. I mean, we can laugh, joke, or whatever. When it comes down to dealing with the music, we're not the same. You have to earn that place. You know, certain things that were said to me, let's face it, the times have changed. Certain things that were said to
Yeah,
me will be very harsh
you can't say
today
them.
to some.
Yeah,
You can't say them.
no,
But I grew and I learned from it in such a way that I think I benefited from it in a way that some people now may not ever get a chance to benefit from those things because everything's a lot safer. Some things just need to be stopped
mm,
and said, look, this is what it is in the music. This is what it is. Because the core is it's the music. It's not personal.
right.
So if you take it so personally, you're missing the point. Um, I didn't want to accept this, and I had to really think about it hard. And I've expressed this to other people. Our elders, wanted it for us more than we wanted it for ourselves. So I find myself as a player and as an educator, I want it for the next generation more than they realize I wanted, more than they realize they wanted for themselves or they needed for themselves.
Right.
Want, need. I don't know.
Mhm.
I want them to succeed more than they want to succeed in some ways.
Interesting. Yeah, and I mean, there's no shortcuts in this music, right? I mean, you have to get knocked down sometimes to get back up. I mean,
Yeah,
I think those for myself, those were some of the most important experiences. Going on stage when I'm not ready, uh, or playing a tune and when I didn't really know it and getting called
right.
out, and then you learn from it and you grow. And
But
it's
now
it's
everybody's so safe. Everybody, you can't say that to me. You hurt my feelings. It's like, well, there is a cultural standard with art that you. I don't expect you to say those kind of things to me, like I hurt your feelings or this is that, this or that. If we're dealing with classical music, why are you doing it with America's classical music?
right.
There's just certain things like I just wouldn't do. And the whole societal thing that's going on right now really should not shape how the music is learned. But
Agreed.
it is.
Yes,
It
totally.
is. Because the part of it being an art form, there's certain things that just happen. I'm not talking about the need to be abusive. We don't want to be abusive. But to say that's incorrect, that's wrong, there's certain things that have like strong historical precedent, which has nothing to do with how you feel.
Right.
Because the statements come up, well, I feel. It has nothing to do with how you feel. This is what's done in the music. How about learn this first and then go over to what you want to interpret it to be or how you feel? I don't want to change everything just because it makes you feel uncomfortable. Like this music is made to make you feel uncomfortable.
Yeah. Well said. Yeah. Great.
Jazz in particular is made to make you feel uncomfortable in the
Yep.
learning process because it's not easy.
No,
It's just not easy.
it's not. It's not. And it's funny because it's not exactly funny. It's just it's a conversation I have with a lot of instructors, and there's a point because of course we want to work, we want to keep our jobs, but we don't go into this because for money, because it's not the it's not the profession to go into, right?
Exactly.
But you want to pass along all the things that you've learned and in sort of the way you learned them, and you have to be so kind of cautious as to the way you present it now.
Yeah, there's no malintent.
Right.
So we just got to make sure that like a certain amount of weight from the past is still passed on because there's so much more information year after year after year that's like compiled compounded, that everyone's thinking like they need to learn this, they need to learn that. What do I need to not do in order to still do what I want to do? Well, that's a hard one.
Yeah.
But there are some fundamental things that like you still would want to have 80% understanding of, because there's so much stuff coming in and so many different angles, so many books. I remember as a kid, an Aebersold record on the back might have been like 20 different
Right.
selections. Now it's like 100 or something like that.
Yeah.
To get different versions of play alongs and things like that.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
and that was on LP as opposed to now download or CD.
Yeah. I mean, do you think all the technology that we have, so for example, like the iReal books and the things like that, is it helpful, or is it somewhat damaging to the tradition of learning this music?
I mean, it's a little both.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of both because, like I said, there's so much information that people have to process. If you're trying to make sure that they have all of their, Western harmony together and they can play piano and like transcribe and do all this stuff, and then they're supposed to learn tunes and do this and do that and be, proficient or masterful on their instruments, that's a lot of work. So these other tools are here to help you get to certain things faster,
Hmm.
but the tools can make you lazy.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of like, it's really anything like how you use the tool.
Hmm.
I studied with a great trumpet player named Webster Young, who's on some Jackie McLean records, and there's a record, two trumpets and two tenors for interplay, Train, Bobby Jasper, Idris Suleiman, and Webster.
Hmm.
And he had a bunch of play alongs, so he would have some that would have the same tune two or three times,
Right.
and he would say, "Which rhythm section did you like?" Well, I like the one on the second one better than the first one. He goes, "Yeah, I did too," and he explained why.
Hmm.
So he used the tool to teach me how to think about a rhythm section, how to choose a band,
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
and that was important. Not just the tune, but like how to think about the synergy and connection between human beings and how it makes you feel.
Great point. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely it's all in the all in the usage, like you said. I mean, some of this stuff would have been great coming up,
Right,
but then again, would I have transcribed as much? Would I have picked things up off of records? Would I be able to go to a singer's jam session and change keys?
right,
Things like that. Where now all I have to do is push a button, boom, which is
right,
nice. It's great. But in a way, I don't think it's conducive to actually learning in the same way. But,
right.
yeah. But anyway, going to it, let's switch gears a little if we can, and talking
Hmm.
about the tradition. Let's talk a little Wayne Shorter,
Sure.
and I guess first off, just give me your overall impressions of his playing.
I love Wayne. I think Wayne is one of the greatest painters in art. Like he's so poetic and he paints and so emotional, but so intellectual.
Mhm.
Even on something as simple as the blues, he can make it sound so complex in his uh, compositional style. Um, you can hear that he's influenced by Train, but he's not. It's like he's kind of his own man.
Right.
Um, he's one of my favorite players and composers in the music. Some people would say favorite composer, but I like him as a player too. There's so much that I've drawn from listening to Wayne over the years for my playing. You know, I like the openness. I like the soul and the spirit, but I like the intellect compositionally. I like how he organizes things. He organizes things in a way that doesn't sound like they're organized, but they're very organized. It
Right.
doesn't sound like school. It really sounds like that's just how he is.
Hmm.
And I have a great appreciation for that. I
Yeah.
also I also feel like as a saxophone player, at times he can be overlooked for his judging one's virtuosity versus the next, which I learned very early on that technique is personal. So long as you can play what you want to play to express yourself, you have technique.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's fundamental things in technique that we all want to do, like at certain tempos, you want to have certain scales and arpeggios and a good tone and things like that. But after that, now it starts to become art. Are we judging based on collegiate Western standards? Or are we going to be judging based on the art and how it affects people? Because I've never heard a jazz listener complain about Wayne's technique or say this. I've never heard a real jazz. I've only heard students.
Huh.
You know,
See,
they
not being a saxophone player, yeah, I've never heard that perception that maybe he wasn't as technically gifted, perhaps.
yeah, people would like to say that they would put Train, they would put Dexter, they would put Stan Getz, they would put all these other. I mean, Johnny Griffin. They all had chops. On first glance, yes, they had maybe more chops, but that's not the point.
Right.
The point is what he did with what he had. You know.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, you do hear, I think, musicians who are also great composers like Wayne Shorter, it's almost like one and the same. I feel like, especially when he's playing his tunes, his compositional style filters into his improvisations.
Oh yeah.
You know,
What's that recording he put out? Man, it's one of my favorite ones from the '90s, and he's got Children of the Night on there and everything. It's got like half synthesizer instruments, the rest regular instruments
yeah.
blended in.
What is he playing a lot of soprano?
A lot of soprano, but he's playing
Yeah.
all the saxophones too. It's a great record, but then there's a video online him playing the same songs in like a quartet or quintet setting. He's playing all the parts because like he's thinking about it as an orchestration.
Mm.
So parts that get moved around, he's playing those parts on saxophone as well as the rhythm section. And someone will call it fusion or whatever. I just hear it as music. I mean, Wayne, to me, much like someone like Archie Shepp or Oliver Lake or any of those, it's just sound. It's just music. You know, to have so many labels and boundaries, he just played sound to me. You
Mm.
know, especially when you got towards the supposed fusion and modern era,
Right.
it just became a texture that he was playing off a different texture to me.
Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty remarkable. I mean, well, did you ever meet? Did you know him?
I didn't know him, but I did meet him. One day I was driving around and I realized he was on a live interview on WBGO.
Mm-hmm.
I was pretty deep downtown Newark. I just hit a hard U, illegal as can be.
Not easy in Newark to do that.
And I drove down to BGO, parked and ran in, listening to his interview, ran in and said, I just had to come meet you. And he was kind of shocked. And I told him I was a saxophone player. We spoke a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't deep, but I just had to see the man. I just had to touch him. I just had to,
Right.
it's like, how was I not going to do that? You know what I mean? How was I not going to do that? I was like, this cat that I love just playing so much. I mean, even for the fact that like Wayne playing with like Freddie,
Mm-hmm.
and having people like James Spalding, because James Spalding is another influence that people kind of overlook, like how they utilize James Spalding. I was like, I had to see one of these people that was that smart,
Mm-hmm.
that deep to understand everybody's role. I mean, for me to run into Wayne and to talk to him, just to see him, would have been the same as if someone said, "Go meet Duke Ellington."
Right.
To me, it's the same thing. It's like people who think with that kind of organizational mind
Mm.
and they're so fluid. I just would love to be around them. That was one of the reasons why I really love Stanley Cowell. That kind of mind, it's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, Wayne Shorter, when you hear his interviews and stuff, he just thinks differently than everybody else. He's
Everybody, yeah.
on a different plane. It's crazy. It was on a different plane. Yeah. So the album we're going to be discussing in this episode is Night Dreamer,
Mm-hmm.
1964.
The Virgo Oriental folk sound.
Yeah,
What's some
Armageddon,
Armageddon,
Black Mountain. Yeah, all,
Black Now.
pretty magical year for him. I mean, that was he recorded, Juju that year. Speak No Evil. They didn't come out that year, but recorded them. Um, Anything about his style? I mean, I feel like Wayne Shorter, no matter what genre he was playing with, whether it's Weather Report or Blakey, he was always Wayne Shorter. But pretty magical year for him being in Miles's band or getting. I think he probably recorded this a little before Miles's band, maybe around the same time. But
Right.
what about his playing in that particular era?
Soulful. I mean, intense and soulful. And you can hear the cry in his sound. You always could hear it, but you could hear it there. And I just find him to be a driving force at that time. And I like the contrast um, between other players during that era because um, there's so much color in this playing that's not just the blues, which I think the blues is very, very important.
Mm-hmm.
There's just so many architecturally musical shapes that he presents. And he's always presenting them. It's just super unique, super unique. You know, there's other songs of his that I'll play from time to time, like I'll play Anna Maria,
Mm.
and I recorded a recording a few months back, and it's like right after he passed. I recorded Toy Tune, and it's like just the way he writes has influenced me so much. Um, he's so crafty,
Yeah,
just so crafty. But once again, it doesn't sound heady, but there's a lot of intellect involved. It's intellectual, but it's extremely accessible to the listener.
I agree. Yeah, I mean, when you look at the way he handled harmony in his tunes, and just even he would write forms, you know, maybe instead of doing a 24 bar structure, it'd be 20 bars, 28 bars.
Right.
Um, yeah, there was just a uniqueness in it, but yet you almost have to do a double take if you're not looking at the chart and you go, that doesn't sound out of the ordinary necessarily. It just sounds like great music. Um,
Yeah, and you can look at some of his charts or the charts that they have of the songs, and you would think it would not really make sense harmonically. But
right.
you sit down and you play it, and you're like, it makes total sense.
Yeah,
It makes total sense.
yeah, I agree. And it's like sometimes even there's a tune on that record, Charcoal Blues, and I'm
Hmm.
listening to it. I'm like, it took me a while to go, yeah, it's a blues, but it's so it's so well hidden that it's. I mean, not maybe he's not trying to hide it, but it's a blues, but not as a blues like you would maybe think. I mean, if it wasn't called Charcoal Blues, I would probably not even realize right away that it's a 12-bar structure. Like it's just the way he handles his phrasing and his melody. It's amazing.
It's like I think we both heard this so many times coming up trying to play. Oh man, it's just the blues.
Yeah.
And like when you really look deeper, it is just the blues. But I was on another kind of interview recently with a trumpet player, Gibton Jellin from the Bahamas. He's doing his thing called In the Shed, and we were talking about the blues and how important it is to play the blues, not a blues. And Wayne plays the blues on a blues all the time. It doesn't have to sound like what we would typically in Western music call a blues scale.
Right.
It just has a cry and a feeling about it that I think is present in the music. You know, I've had the good fortune of knowing a few people that know Wayne, that were from Newark.
Yeah.
The Phipps family, you know, and I've known several Phipps that would tell me Wayne's stories and how he started and how he was as a person.
Hmm.
I've had people I've met that spent time with him, talking to him. They all say that he basically speaks the way he plays.
Yeah,
You
that's
know,
excellent.
it's not such a far stretch. You know, so with from a night dreamer to a Virgo to Oriental folk song.
Mm.
I mean, for a guy during that period to be thinking about Oriental folk song, to think about a title like that,
Yeah,
he's got he must have been checking out so many other things other than the average Joe.
yeah, yeah. I think there's. I mean, I think him and Train used to get together a lot and listen to all kinds of, for lack of a better term, world music.
Yeah,
You know, and you could hear it, like you mentioned earlier. I think it was a good point. There is the Train influence around this time, but he's not trying to be Train. I mean, of course, this record he's got, Reggie Workman, Elvin Jones. People are so McCoy Tyner. People are associated with Train, so there's that connection. But
right.
still very individualistic.
I mean, so much so that, like, I mean, he's influenced so many folks. You know, I look at the Marsalis brothers, Winton and Branford, as my big brothers,
Hmm.
and I used to have. I mean, we're still cool. I just haven't seen him in a while. Branford used to be very close, speaking to each other. It's a big brother figure. Man, Wayne did a number on him. Wayne really kind of helped him get to who he is. Wayne and Sonny Rollins. Wayne, um, if you're open to it and you're not just hell bent on the rules look like square peg, and you know, you're not just in the box all the time.
Right.
Wayne can really open you up to a lot of different musical possibilities. I just find it, to me, sometimes a shame that people think that because the music is charted, that they should play it. I think you should experience it, try to play it, but not everybody as an improviser is really ready for that level of intensity and information. Um, I grew up with guys who were trying to play, like, Pinocchio and stuff like that, and the Sorcerer. I'm like, why are we playing these songs?
Yeah.
We don't have enough information to even deal with this material.
Yeah.
It's so deep. We need some age on us and some other experiences in life.
Good point.
And
Yeah.
then you also need to be open in such a way that you don't come with judgment. You have to be musically like an open vessel,
Sure.
to play Wayne's music. If you just deal with it from a technical perspective, much like Train playing A Love Supreme,
Hmm.
or later on, like the Olatunji concert, or live, like, was it live in Philadelphia, or before he passed, all, you just gotta accept it as a thing, because it's just too heavy. It's just too deep.
Yeah.
I mean, at least for me personally, I'm a deeply emotional person when it comes down to those kinds of sounds, especially if I go and approach it openly.
Hmm.
I've been known to just cry because it's like, I can't believe these guys were doing this at this time in history when all these other things were going on in the world, and this thing came out of that.
Yeah. I mean, crazy. First of all, I mean, the year that this album. I mean, what a crazy, just a crazy time in America.
Right,
Um, politically, socially, and then musically. I mean, the Beatles arrived in 1964. It's
right,
just so much. I mean, Train's doing these remarkable things,
right.
and everything. It's cool. All right, man. Anything else you want to promote, or anything else you'd like to say about Wayne Shore?
Love Wayne. Love, keep supporting him. I mean, we're all very affected by him not being here, and I work with Buster Williams, and I can tell he was extremely affected because they played together and know each other, and Buster and Herbie and Wayne are all Buddhists. So is Steve Teray and
Mm.
Stanley Cowell. They were all Buddhists. They chanted Namyo Renge Kyo, and they all have a connection to each other because of their faith and what they believe. I could just see it. It's a little heavy for guys like that. It's not just on the musical side through their faith, and I just wish everybody the best who's dealing with it that way, because he's a force that's just gone off. And we have to try our best to still try to uphold that, not rush to the new, but still keep some of that going. Maybe push it a little bit, but still think like Wayne. Try to approach like Wayne. Try to give back like Wayne. I think the music is in desperate need of more forces like that.
Yeah, agreed.
Promotion. A bunch of little summer gigs, things like that. Semester's coming to an end at Montclair State and at the Juilliard School where I teach.
Mhm.
And looking forward to some, instead of maintenance time, practice time and family time and different things, doing around here. So I'm just promoting my life. And then I have a recording coming out, the great drummer Willie Jones III on his label in the fall.
Okay.
So that's what he had mentioned, fall release.
Cool.
So I'm looking for that. I'll get back to you about that. We haven't mixed it yet, but I think we're soon to go in with the notes and go ahead and mix and master.
Nice. So maybe when the record comes out, we hook up again. We talk about the album if you're cool with it.
Yeah, Brandon McCune, myself, Willie Jones III, and Lonnie Plaxico on bass.
Oh, excellent. Great bass player. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, Bruce. Good to see you, man.
Jay, thank you so much for having me, and hello to your audience, and thank you all for,